So now I guess the big question is it worth visiting Saranda? Everyone says that Saranda is the place to be during the very hot Albanian summer, but I decided to spend the month of July here in Vlore. I did, however, go to Saranda for one weekend to see what all the fuss was about. Let me share my impressions with you. Getting to Saranda here from Vlore wasn't exactly a walk in the park. There weren't a lot of reliable timetables for the buses online. So after asking around here in the neighborhood, I heard what was pretty much a rumor that the buses left from the mosque downtown at a certain time. So I headed to downtown Vlore at that certain time, and there was indeed transportation to Saranda, but they were minivans, and although there was air coming out of the vents, it was definitely not AC, and it was 40 degrees outside at least. So that minivan cost around $8, and it was packed to the brim. There was even a couple left standing, and I actually had to teach a class through my iPad in that minivan, in that heat. I'll never do that again. After about an hour and a half, our first stop was in the town of Gjirokastid. Half of the passengers got off the minivan, so it became a little easier to breathe in there. So I definitely thought the worst was over, but we took a small road across the mountains, and this driver started driving like a bat out of hell. This guy was talking on his phone, wearing flip-flops, and overpassing the other cars in the worst possible moments on this very narrow mountain road. And not to mention how queasy I felt because he was going incredibly fast and there were tons of curves. Let me tell you, I had never seen anything like this where I literally felt lucky to be alive when it was all over. Upon arriving in Saranda alive, I checked into my hotel called JB. And I decided to splurge a bit because considering the temperatures, it had a pool and it ended up being a pretty good spot. Considering how expensive the high season is in Saranda, I felt that $60 a night was a pretty fair price. The room was small, but it had AC and a pretty nice balcony with a view. There was also breakfast included, which was actually delicious. Honestly, the only downside was that they didn't really seem to offer any food options at night. And considering that it was a 15-minute downhill walk to the city center, I had to walk up in that 40-degree heat every time I wanted to go downtown. But overall, I would recommend them as it was a great bang for buck. Now, about Saranda itself, there's no denying that it's a beautiful place. And it seems like they have 300 sunny days a year, which is awesome. It's only 14 kilometers away from the island of Corfu in Greece, which you can actually see from their promenade. It is a pebble beach, so you'd probably be more comfortable in one of those water shoes, but while I was there, I totally roughed it. The water is nice, cool, and calm with no waves, just as you'd expect from the Mediterranean. And what's really cool about the beach is that they have these lanes in the corner next to the port where you can actually do some swimming. Now, since it is one of the priciest areas here in Albania, the wealthier Albanians flock there every summer. And with that, of course, you get the youth flaunting their cars. Quite the obsession here around the Balkans. You know how it is, they're blasting that terrible music through their speakers, and the general vibe of the place is of overpriced restaurants and bars where people can just kind of show off how rich they are. Also, for that reason, the traffic seemed to be pretty heavy the whole time I was there. So I'm actually not sure I would recommend driving there because you'd have a pretty hard time driving around and parking. But then again, you might be running a life risk if you take a minivan. So I guess it's your call. I'd actually like to recommend a place that I had dinner at over there. The service was excellent and I had some of the best curry of my life, even better than some in Indonesia. I also got a starter and a glass of wine and it came out to about $17, which of course is much pricier than the average meal here in Albania, but it was well worth the price. I think it's worth saying that you can definitely find decently priced meals in Saranda. I think you just kind of have to steer off the main promenade. I asked around and people told me to go ask the drivers. They're there all day in front of the ruins of this ancient synagogue. Naturally, I went there a day early to try to get the information that I needed. I did get some information, I just didn't feel too certain about the hearsay nature of it. So I went back the next day at the planned time and everything did work out as planned. But the funny thing is that they told me to buy my ticket at this little travel agency, which is just around the corner behind behind the ruins. And there they had all the timetables and the possibility of buying your tickets in advance. So I guess the question is, why hadn't anyone even mentioned this place before? Would have made things a little easier. The minibus I took back here to Vlore was in much better condition. It was $2 more expensive, so that's a total of $10, but it had actual AC and a responsible driver, which is the exact opposite that I had going to Saranda. Coming back, the driver took the coastal route, which of course meant beautiful views, but it took an hour and a half longer, and honestly, I would have just preferred to arrive much quicker. Of course they do that because they have to drop off everyone at all the other beach towns on the way here to Vlore. Hey, at least my life wasn't at risk, right? So now I guess the big question is it worth visiting Saranda? I think the biggest takeaway was don't just go there for the weekend unless you're already reasonably close to the town. It definitely wasn't worth spending 9 hours on transport just so I could enjoy one full day in Saranda. While it's certainly a nice place, I'm just not sure it's too different from many other beach towns that you see here in Albania. There just seems to be some hype attached to it. As you saw in this video, if you rent a scooter here in Vlore, you can be at some pretty amazing beaches in under 20 minutes. So although I don't regret going to Saranda, if I were to visit again, I would surely do some things different. I've created a community over on Facebook in which we encourage each other to find our freedom through travel, and it's a great way to get tips like the ones that I've given you here today. It's free and it's growing by the day, so I've left a link to that down below, and I hope to chat with you over there on Facebook groups. It's called Nomad Nation. I'm also going to leave my Albania playlist here so you can check out everything else that I've been doing here in this beautiful country. I'll catch you on the next one.